So when you're setting up your damages, I set up damages in this way. In the opening statement, I set up signpost. By that, I explained to them that the damages in this case, after I've discussed liability, I set up signpost in opening statement by saying, the damages that you'll be called upon as the sole judges in this case, your sole judges of the damages, are physical pain, mental anguish, physical disability, physical disfigurement. Those are the general damages. Now, when you get into the jury room, you're going to be asked to place a dollar amount on physical pain, mental anguish, physical disability, physical disfigurement, and anything else you got. So in order for you to discuss that, you can only do that from the evidence. So I will be bringing you evidence supporting our position, and it's that evidence upon which you will base your judgment. So listen for the evidence of et cetera, et cetera. Now, you've set them up for the anchors. Then when you start examining your nurse, then the anchor is this. You start the question with the nurse. All right, let's turn now to the mental anguish that Mr. Jones suffered while he was in your care in the hospital. Or you talk later, but anytime you get to proof of the physical pain, the physical disability, all right, you got the rehab person on. Let's talk now about the physical disability of Mr. Jones and what type of rehab we're doing to, and so forth. So you set those anchors up, and then you use those guidelines, those signposts I call them, use those signposts as you go through your proof so that they'll know that, okay, I got to listen to this part right now because I'm going to be called upon to put a dollar amount on this. So use those signposts and then tie it all together with your emotional appeal at the end. Reference points. There are a couple of points I'd mention on this. We like to set up reference points on damages. You need to prime damages like you need to prime anything else. Pat Maloney, great lawyer from San Antonio, he had a simple, he'd just say, this, ladies and gentlemen, this is a case involving millions and millions of dollars. He never put a precise figure on it. He'd say, this is a case involving millions and millions of dollars, or hundreds of thousands of dollars, regardless, depending on what it was. Most of his were millions and millions of dollars. And so he would do that during voir dire examination. Now, don't get pinned down on voir dire examination on what your damages are, because honestly, you don't know what your damages are. You don't know what your proof is going to be. We all hope we know, we think we know, we pray to God we know what our proof is going to be, but how many times have we been in there? Am I the only one that's ever tried a case where my proof didn't go on exactly the way I wanted it to? You know, I can't remember a case I ever tried where it did. So be careful about making any kind of promises. So keep your position very, very general on damages, and you can talk about the elements of damage, but in terms of the money, I was doing a voir dire, and I said, you know, this case involves millions and millions of dollars. Now, Mr. Jones, if you're called upon, if the evidence supports it, can you return a verdict in millions of dollars? And the defendant objected. He said, we're entitled to know this millions and millions of dollars. We're entitled to know exactly how much Mr. Nations is suing for. So the judge said, Mr. Nations, I said millions and millions of dollars, Your Honor. He said, fine, you may proceed, because that's what we were suing for. We're suing for millions and millions of dollars. But let me tell you, the best way I know, the best thing, if you can get it done, this is the best thing you can do, A, on priming damages, and B, on setting up strikes for cause. And that is if you could get a supplemental juror questionnaire. I've had more luck with this than with anything I've done in terms of getting rid of the tort reform jurors. You ask a question, if you can get your supplemental juror questionnaire, and that's a whole speech unto itself. But if you get a supplemental juror questionnaire, you ask the question something on the order of, if the evidence supports it, can you return a verdict of, and pick a number, $10 million in this case? Okay, if not, why not? And then the tort reformers just can't stand it. They just can't put yes on that. So they'll put no, and then if not, why not, or if no, please explain, and they'll write stuff that will give you the right to strike them because it's predicated by if the evidence supports it. But here's the priming aspect of that. You've primed every juror with a figure of $10 million. So now when you come in and you start putting on your proof and you end up asking for $5 million, it sounds very reasonable. It's a very reasonable request. So, and it can be $2 million. It can be whatever you want it to be. It can be $100,000. It can be $50,000. But it's a multiple of what your actual ask is going to be. So now I taught damages in law school for 25 years, and I've been trying cases for 47 years. And during that time, I've picked up a couple of ideas about how to handle damages. One of the things you have to do, I think these days, is we come in with the conscious mind evidence first. We come in with our voir dire, with our opening statement, and then with our evidence on the things they can see, touch, feel, the actual hard evidence. That's the conscious mind evidence. The physical pain, mental anguish, and so forth, that's more of the unconscious mind evidence. So you want to come in with your strong evidence of things like X-rays. If you're going to, I'm just talking about just your damages proof. You want to prove your liability first. But just in your damages proof, you want to show them things first. Show them things that are real proof instead of. So you start building a body of evidence. Now, here's the thing that I think is the most important thing I've developed over my years of teaching this subject. Evaluate each element of damage separately. In our submissions in Texas, we used to submit physical pain with an amount, mental anguish with an amount, and then everything had to be separate. They kept moving it around, and as we got more and more Republican judges, it became physical pain and mental anguish as one element of damage. Then it became pain and suffering, or pain and anguish. And so here's the most important thing I can tell you, which is that every element of damage should have its own body of proof. And what we do is this. We take the subject of physical pain and we put it up on the board in our war room. And then we put every kind of evidence that we have that bears on physical pain and suffering up on the board. We look at our expert testimony, our lay testimony, our documentary evidence, and our demonstrative evidence, and then anything that we have in discovery, admissions and so forth from the defense, if there's anything there. And we list those on the board. So we develop a full body of proof just on the element of physical pain and suffering, as if it were the only element in the case. When we finish that, we go to the next element, which is mental anguish. And we put mental anguish up on the board. And we say, okay, let's talk about every expert we have that can testify to mental anguish. Let's talk about every page of the medical record that reflects mental anguish. Let's talk about every lay witness we can have who can testify on mental anguish. And then we put what that evidence is up on the board. And then what graphics do we have? What demonstrative evidence do we have? And we go through that with physical pain, mental anguish, physical disability, physical disfigurement, and then we do the same thing with the special damages. Make sure that we got everything, and that way we can sit there at the table and look around the walls. I have 3 walls of chalkboard, and we can look around the room and see our entire body of evidence on damages. Then we go back to the demonstrative evidence part of it and say, okay, what do we have on demonstrative on this? Okay, what can we do to improve that? For the simplest, obviously, is take an x-ray and make it into a positive, that type thing. But how can we improve that evidence? How can we make it more persuasive, more understandable by the jury? Then we look around and we can see the holes in your evidence that way. You can find out where your holes are. And then where you have the holes in the evidence on any element of damage, or liability for that matter, you say, okay, what can we create? What can we create that will help us prove that point? And then we start creating animations, we create timelines, we create whatever we need to fill in those holes. And if you do that, you'll find yourself with a substantial body of evidence. And if you don't, you'll find out by doing that, you find out where your weaknesses are. This is maximize your salient points and minimize your weaknesses. Well, this helps you identify your weaknesses and then figure out how to make them better.